On today's podcast of Data for All, Data Advocacy. Welcome to the Data for All podcast. I'm Charlie Yilden.
And I'm Charlie Apigian, where we want to empower you to think different with data.
And on today's podcast, we're looking at a topic that we've talked about in general terms, but today we'll take a deep dive into data advocacy.
Yes, and this is a topic where it has many facets, including inspiring and educating others. But today we are going to focus on how tech, data, and that new thing called AI is perceived and managed with our government and our communities.
And so to help us with that today, we brought in a true expert on the topic, Alex Curtis of the Nashville Technology Council. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I just have to say, can we go, before we get to all the great stuff about Alex, because this is going to be like a gushy, because Alex and I have gone through trials and tribulations in this world of advocacy together. I, in the beginning, had no interest in this. Isn't that right, Alex?
You were very much a skeptic.
I was a skeptic.
A skeptic of what?
Government. I didn't want to get
yeah.
involved in the advocacy side. And Alex is like, why don't you come to DC with us? And I'm like, and I think it was at the end of that, I remember it very well. And I was at the end and he goes, well, so what do you think? And I said, I don't like this place. And then what happened after that, Alex?
And then you've been like the biggest proponent of it in our organization, which is wonderful.
And a lot of the reasons for that is because Alex is a true pioneer in the world of data advocacy. And I don't just mean that in Nashville. Mm-hmm. He is recognized throughout the country, especially through the other technology councils. There is a national organization called TECHNA. Alex is very involved in that, and you do lead the public policy for TECHNA as well, not just here in Nashville, correct?
I serve as the chair of the advocacy committee for TECHNA.
Okay, and there's a reason why Alex is good at this stuff, mm-hmm. And so Alex, I'd love for you just to tell your story a little bit, and then we'll start diving into all that other fun stuff.
Yeah, heck yeah, I'm
Sure.
very interested to hear.
Well, I don't know how interesting of a story it is, but the crux of it all is that I kind of started working on tech policy at an early age. I got the opportunity to intern on Capitol Hill when I was in college, between my freshman and sophomore year, I think it was, and so I went to DC. I was one of those free unpaid interns that you hear about, and I worked in the United States Senate for the state of Ohio senator. And it was an amazing experience. I was 17 years old, and I didn't know what to expect. I think I'd been to DC, in high school, and have visited a few times, but didn't really have any passion for it. And then when we just had the opportunity to intern for this new incoming senator, and the neat things I got to do were I got to kind of serve constituents, so I got to help answer emails and paper mail from constituents. This was also during a time when, this is 1995, so the internet was just coming out, and one of the things I was doing while going back kind of to the dorms while I was living in DC was starting to program HTML and making web pages.
Wow.
And this is before the Senate had a website.
Yeah.
And so I got the opportunity because someone I worked for there on the Hill saw that I was playing with HTML, and they said, "Okay, you're going to get to make the senator's first website." And so that was a crazy thing you get to do during a college internship.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I got to work on some tech policy too, which was an amazing opportunity, right? So a lot of the technology policy that was happening at the time where the Telecommunication Act of 1996 was being written while I was there. So I got to help senators and policymakers understand what the internet was.
Wow.
Yay.
And so really tried to help explain, kind of what the impacts of certain levers and switches on the for legislation were about, and that really kind of helped me understand, like, okay, so this is really how the sausage gets made.
Yeah.
People that are writing a lot of legislation have probably little to no understanding of what they're writing about.
Yeah.
They have a lot of policy wonks and a lot of lobbyists coming and telling them why they need laws written certain ways.
Sure.
And so as just kind of this lowly intern, I got to go and explain to my senator, here's how all this works, and here's why writing it this way would have an impact on this or that. And so it was an amazing experience for me. It got me hooked on talking about policy and understanding why, these types of things matter. And on the other side, on the tech side of it, it was really neat because we ended up being the second senator on the web by one day. We missed it. Senator John Ashcroft was the first senator, and then my senator was second. And so it was a really neat experience. It was the first public website that I had ever made. So it was very rudimentary. But at the time, it still lays the foundation of how all Senate websites are kind of laid out.
Oh, really?
Like where in the navigation everything ends up being, where your constituent mail and where listing of committees and things like that. Still very much everybody kind of follows the same method from those days. So it was really neat, interesting opportunity, and I got the opportunity during college, during breaks, to go back to DC and work in my local office to work for legislators, doing very much the same two things. And when I started law school, I did the same thing. I got to work on the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, which was really neat during the time of Napster and a lot of copyright debates and fights, and
the big tech boom in the early aughts, right?
Tech boom and the big pitch for selling digital stuff online.
Yeah, that's true.
And like I said, Napster was the big thing. We installed Napster on a bunch of Senate computers to help them understand what it was to use this technology and how it made it, number one, easy to get access to that, but also to help them understand, what the ramifications are for that. Like selling that stuff online, is it easier to sell online? Is it hard? And helping them to understand. And, famous hearings with Senator Hatch talking to the RIA saying, hey, you need to be making this stuff available. And it was really neat times, right? I'm in the background of a lot of different epic kind of tech debates, especially on Capitol Hill.
That's awesome.
When the iPhone came out, and there was a lot of talk about using and making apps available on the iPhone and things like that. Senator Markey used my iPhone during the hearing because I was just a staffer and was able to give it to him. So it's
your iPhone is famous. Is that what you're saying?
My iPhone is famous. Yeah. So it was really just an important and neat time in technology to be working on tech policy, and I was one of the few early folks at the time who kind of had this spanned both C's of that, right? So on the policy side, working on the policy, but also having enough of a tech background to be informative and help people understand what the tech policy meant.
Yeah, I always say that we're the generation that lives 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because we've got a foot firmly in life without technology, but also one with the technology, and we're going to be the only generation that has that perspective, because our youngins, they're just all technology.
Yep.
And so it's a unique place to be for sure. And I really think that's cool that you were there having that conversations, but it also seems like we're back to having some of those similar conversations with some of the new data and AI stuff that's been coming out recently.
It looks a lot like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
So it does feel the same to you?
Very much so. Yeah.
That's cool.
All right. So where'd you grow up? Because you said Ohio.
Let's hear about you.
I want to know about little Alex.
Originally from Ohio, Northeast Ohio. Born and raised there. I went to college in North Carolina at Wake Forest University, and then that's where I did a lot of internships and things like that from. Went back to Ohio for law school, the University of Akron Law School.
There you go.
Big on intellectual property there. That's where the Inventors Hall of Fame is. And then after law school, moved to DC to work on Capitol Hill, and I worked for a public interest group for a number of years. We worked on a lot of tech policy, fighting for really consumers and creators and kind of startups to make sure that kind of the technology and the laws that were written enabled innovation.
Yeah, innovation, ownership, things like that, right?
And new uses, right? YouTube today wouldn't exist without a lot of the tech policy that was written at that time. So making sure that people can upload user-generated content, right, was a new thing. Anybody that can broadcast, just like you guys are doing today, anybody can have access to that and not automatically, but very easily find a growing audience without having to go through traditional channels. You don't have to get on one of the broadcast television channels just to be able to find an audience. And it didn't used to be that way, just like you're saying, one leg in, one leg out.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing how the world doesn't remember. It wasn't that long ago when you couldn't just put your own stuff there and find an audience and
Wow.
find a large.
Yeah, there's always
base
a
of people.
gatekeeper
There's
somewhere.
always a gatekeeper, and YouTube at that time was this huge opening for anybody could post. You didn't have to pay bandwidth charges. You didn't have to do all this stuff, and there was a lot of copyright debates about people posting stuff they didn't own to the website.
Yeah.
But a lot of that had to get figured out in the law so that platforms like that could exist, so that innovators and creators like you guys today could have a platform to be able to do that. And that was world changing. And a lot of the people that owned the original platforms that were the gatekeepers wanted to write the laws in different ways.
Oh, I bet they did.
Right. And so making sure that that open innovation could happen was really what I was, and a lot of the people I work with, is what we were fighting for.
Yeah, did you hear
Nice.
that, Charlie? We are content creators. We're
Absolutely.
all because of Alex. We have that opportunity.
Not true at all.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
Wait,
but you
no,
saw
that's
it.
what
You saw it happen.
That's what I heard, though.
Yeah.
Like because of Alex and folks that have pursued the same things that he's pursued, we have an open and more fair internet than we might have had otherwise.
Yeah. I forget that there used to be the 7-second delay or whatever it used to be. I mean, everything, including radio, used to have that. And there would be somebody there with a button in case you would have a swear word. Now we can say every F word we feel like, which we don't have to. But
Fudge.
fudge, farkin. No,
No,
not good
not
enough.
that one.
Not good enough. All right. So Akron, by the way, very close to where my wife grew up, and obviously I spent a lot of time in Ohio as well. Have a lot of family still in Ohio. The only thing we have against Alex is he roots for the wrong university. He's wearing red. I noticed
You're
that.
wearing blue.
I'm wearing blue, and my team wins more than yours over the last 3 years. That's all I'll say, even though we just lost our coach. But and I had the pleasure of watching the national championship with you. But before we go into the trips that you have put on for people here in the community, what brought you to Nashville?
Sure. So in 2010, I had a child in 2009, and my wife and I were trying to figure out what was next, and we were looking for opportunities to continue what we do, but do it a little differently, and not live in a shoebox on Capitol Hill. And Nashville was an easy place to understand why it would make a lot of sense for us to move to the area. We had family in Franklin, and saw it as an opportunity to explore new opportunities. And so we did that. And at least initially, I was working for the same organization, the public interest organization, Public Knowledge. And I started a project to help creatives understand how to leverage the technology that we just talked about to find an audience and make a living from their creativity. So I worked with a bunch of bands initially to help them understand how to leverage a lot of these platforms to find audiences. And help them understand why the policy mattered. The exact same stuff that I just talked about, why it mattered for them to have access to YouTube so that they could find an audience. And it ended up making them really good advocates because as users of the technology, they understood why it mattered, why the law mattered.
Yeah.
And then they
felt
became
it.
really good advocates and they could explain why it mattered to them to policymakers. And so there was a wonderful byproduct of working with them directly to help them understand how to use the technology, that they became really good advocates later on. And so soon after some of those big policy debates were happening, I was able to take some people from Nashville to tell them, help them advocate for themselves, and help them tell policymakers why writing a law in a certain way made it easier for them to find their audience and do business. And not that it was cutting anybody else's legs out from under them, but they're small artists. They didn't have to deal with the original gatekeepers. They could find their own audience and find their own living, and that was really important. That voice was really important to impact the different copyright laws that were trying to kind of change how the internet worked.
Well, I'm really glad you were doing that because I have very much enjoyed watching all of the power brokers in media get their butts handed to them, for lack of a better word, or lack of a better phrase, and because I very much like the fact that of what you were talking about earlier, where if we just decide that we want to do something, then we can do that thing. We can put it out. We can advocate for ourselves. And what stops us from being successful isn't what somebody else is not allowing us to do or keeping us from or something like that. It's just, did we hustle enough? Did we find our audience? Did we do the things that have been laid out for us by these new platforms and this new, like legislation, outlook, cultural application, whatever you want to call it?
Right. And I think there's a question of like whether, competition is an important thing. And just because you've had a business doesn't mean you should always have that business, right?
Right.
You can't rest on your laurels, especially if you're neglecting your audiences and your customers. And that was the big argument for a lot of it, was that, look, there's these newcomers that are changing the opportunities for so many different people.
Yeah.
The internet is a complete platform game changer.
Yeah.
And so how can anybody leverage that? Some of the existing gatekeepers didn't like that.
Yeah.
And to adapt.
Some of them work their way into the new industries too. Like we had a podcast with a music person, and they were telling us about how mechanical licenses still work with digital, like infinitely copyable things.
Yep.
And it very much feels like a monkey on somebody's back, just getting carried along for the ride because nobody wanted to say, "Hey, your time is done. Time to get out of here."
Yeah, mechanical license deals with a piano player roll, right? It's
Yeah.
the roll of paper that you put in a piano that when you cranked it, generated music. That's the mechanical piece of the license. That's where that comes from.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so that's what we're still talking about when we're talking about licensing digital rights, mechanical licenses.
But it still applied though when we were getting CDs and records and tapes though, because that's a mechanical aspect of it. Correct or no? Because that may be a misconception on my part.
No, it's not because the machine was. It's not because these things are mechanical physical things. It's because the original license was around a player piano.
So it's not new that it's obsolete.
Correct.
Okay.
It's been obsolete for a long time.
I was not aware of that. There's a
Part
whole
of these-
industry around that though.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that because there's a giant industry, those are really difficult things to change and update. And even though technology can make a giant, huge leap and completely change paradigms, when you've got this existing giant industry to deal with that has forever dealt with mechanical licensing, it's hard to change. So like the MLC exists because Congress and a lot of people came to Congress to finally change some of that law so that there could be an entity like the MLC to help manage that and help artists figure out how they need to get paid.
Yeah, MLC being the Mechanical Licensing Collective, and they are here basically to be. And we actually did a hackathon with them, so we actually were able to look at the data. But it's all of the data for all of the rights to music, and you have to go in to their system and say that's you.
Yeah, you have
if
to
you wanna
claim
get
it.
paid.
We
Yeah.
talked about that some.
Yep.
And so money just sits there sometimes without it being claimed.
And yes, well, one of the big recording companies has to keep that money for a certain amount of time, but then over time they don't. So it's not to their advantage for you to get paid. So they're not going to be very active in that. So it's amazing to think about the different evolutions of how technology has changed music and the creation of content, but obviously it's so much more than that. And so did you go from there to where you are today, which is the Nashville Technology Council?
Yeah, when I was looking for opportunities here locally, I think there was a giant hole for talking about tech policy locally. And obviously, I mean, what is the adage of, if you're a hammer, all you see is nails. So I'm a policy hammer. All I saw was policy nails, and I didn't see a lot of nails around. And so I had a few recommendations to talk to a few different people, and one of those was the leadership at the Nashville Tech Council, where an amazing association that had been around for a number of years, but was really more focused on bringing the community together over a number of different ways, but rarely around policy. They really didn't have a policy focus on it, and that was a giant missed opportunity in my mind.
Yeah, you saw what they were missing.
Right? And so it was an opportunity there. I thought that it could be a new facet for the organization and something that could grow and really could be a powerhouse for, working on the laws that matter to the growth of the tech industry locally. and we're talking more about state policy than federal policy, but it was a great opportunity. The chamber does a lot of work on especially local policy, but no one was addressing tech issues. And more as policymakers get into different topics, they will touch on tech issues and they will impact business. And we saw that very quickly as I started to get engaged with the organization and worked with one of our previous CEOs to start a job here and work a little more on communications as well. And we started an advocacy committee where we, the methodology for building people starting to care about advocacy, it had to be grown, right? It didn't exist. And so there was a lot of, tried to be very methodical about, okay, if I'm starting from scratch, how would I do this? And what are the pitfalls I don't want to run into? And what are the things that I want to make sure from the beginning we could do to grow it? And it really was around, because we're starting from scratch and no one knew us as an entity to do policy, it was really about doing education. So working with our members to help them understand some of the different issues. Because the organization put on tons of events, there was a great opportunity to do that. So we started hosting events around that. And at each one of those events, we wanted to make sure that, number one, we were bringing an audience to it to educate them. So the content was about education. For most of the programs, we wanted to at least invite a policymaker so that they started associating with us with working on policy and started seeing faces that they could then connect with. And then thirdly is by looking, maybe this is data related, but looking at who, because each of those events was based on a different topic, but touched on policy, looking at who attended each one of those events. So what butts were in what seats.
Sure.
And that helped us understand, okay, you might care about this tech policy just by purely looking at the guest list. And then as a method of growing that, right, every time we, had an event, if it was this related to this topic, then we know, oh, well, they attended before. Maybe it's a policy issue that they care about. Let's send them messages about that and see if they respond or see if they care. And we're going to the Hill. Let's invite them because they attended that event. And so, if you're starting from scratch, you got to, the one additional person makes a difference at each one of these things. And then, so we started doing that with the advocacy committee that we started at the NTC. We got a number of people that said they cared about advocacy and tech policy, and asked them for the issues that they thought were interesting, and started focusing on those and holding events and bringing policymakers together, starting to have Hill days where we would go to the local legislature just to show that we existed. Right? Because we didn't have a presence. They didn't know us from Adam. And really tried to bring to them the people that cared about tech policy. You were one of the first people that joined those visits on the Hill. And help those state legislators understand, okay, here's the issues we care about. And for an organization like a tech council, which is a lot like a chamber of commerce for anybody who doesn't know what a tech council is, our main issue is about workforce development, right? How can we put more people to work in the tech industry, because there's a ton of jobs open.
Yeah, and that's why it was so easy for me to get involved, because from an advocacy perspective, I was the one that cared about people getting jobs. And that was a huge issue. So did you, I'm trying to remember the year that you started with.
2015.
2015. So was Brian Moyer or was it Huddleston?
Brian Huddleston.
It was Huddleston, okay.
Yep. And I had just come off a mayoral campaign. I had worked on one of the not winning mayoral campaigns and had talked to Brian before that. It was a neat opportunity because I had been talking to him for a little while, and we hosted our first mayoral candidate debate with the NTC. So we brought in all the candidates and got to do a little bit of kind of like speed dating with all the different candidates, same way we do it today.
Yeah,
that's cool.
I did that before I started with the NTC.
Oh wow, I'm trying to think if I was at that one because I got 2013 is when I started getting involved with the NTC, but it was probably more like 2015 when I really started getting involved. Because and again, I think I've been on the board pretty much that for a while with that. So you came in that year. When did you feel like? Then I want to get into the issues, of course, but obviously workforce development. But when did you feel like advocacy was starting to take traction? Because early on, before you were in Nashville, there was no tech scene. It was hospitals were our tech.
You mean in Middle Tennessee?
In the Middle Tennessee area. Yeah. And so. But then all of a sudden, there's all these new tech companies coming, and there's all these new tech jobs. And so, do you feel immediately, or was it a slow burn?
For advocacy, yeah, it took a little while. I
Yeah.
mean, the tech scene was definitely growing tech for tech's sake, right? Less
It's just
less
it's
so just
it's
healthcare tech,
Yeah.
but like there was a lot of action going on grassroots wise, people holding meetups and things like that, talking about tech. That had been happening for years. And I attended a bunch of those meetups before I even started working at the NTC. So it was definitely, there was a lot growing and happening. People were excited and getting engaged in different ways. And Nash Cocktail came, it wasn't
yeah.
NTC's, it was Dave Delaney's years before that. So I attended a bunch of those. And so, but advocacy took a while, right? I think getting people to understand this is something that they should care about, they should be interested in. And really it was about, you talk a lot about data storytelling, not so much around data, but it actually was around data. I mean, I think getting people to understand the issues that they really do care about and the applicable pieces to policy, that's advocacy, right?
Yep.
Getting people to figure out the issues that they care about, the topics that they're interested in, and then the different levers that they can effectuate to change those things.
yeah. Seek to understand so you can be understood.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so early on, you started doing the roadshow. So that's when I obviously started getting involved. You would do the days on the Hill. Obviously, you're bringing people here, and then you obviously even go to DC. And that I'd always loved, and I've gone to a few of those now.
Most of.
I think I have been to almost everyone. I want to get there this year if I can. But for me, it's two things. It's like I loved after the first year of being part of this slow burn, because the first year you go, you're new. The second year you feel like you're doing the exact same thing again. The third year I was like, oh, they remembered us. And then the fourth year they're asking us advice. And so it was this slow evolution as we did that. But also I was so interested in the people that would go with us and these like-minded individuals that were interested in advocacy. Was that, did you start those, or did Brian Huddleston start, or was that you at that time?
Sure. So every year we go to DC with a National Association of Tech Councils. It's called TECHNA. And Brian had been the year before to that, I think at least the year before.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of the other folks previous to Brian had done any of those, but yeah, it was a great opportunity. They hosted a Hill Day where they made it really easy for people that were flying in from all across the U.S. to meet with their members of Congress. And they held like a half-day program and sent people to the Hill and just to meet with legislators.
Is this like individuals and organizations, or just for organizations?
Sure. So the way most people did it, most of the local people did it, were they sent their staff to this, again, kind of association program, and then that staff went and advocated for their local membership as kind of representatives of theirs to visit the Hill.
Cool.
With my prior background in tech policy, we had done a few kind of Hill Days where we brought in experts about a topic that didn't live in DC and took them around to the Hill. And I did it a couple times and built like a little packet of here's how to do all this. Here's here's the things that matter. Here's how to have a meeting. Here's what to do when you're in that meeting. Here's what, the follow-up messages and all the rest of that. So I had kind of a little experience of doing that.
Yeah.
And I know, being on the policy side, on the actual staff side in a lot of these offices, it's great to talk to someone who's a representative of someone. But it's even better to talk to the person that actually is doing the thing that they're talking about, right? So it's one thing for me to represent the tech industry on behalf of our hundreds of members, but it's better to bring our members, right? It's always better to bring the people that are actually doing the thing.
Yeah.
And so that was where I wanted to really change that fly-in program, being less about us as advocates of the tech industry and more helping the local members be advocates for themselves, because they're going to do a better job at it because they know the nuances of it, and they have a lot more credibility, right? You're the people doing the actual work. You are the better advocate.
I get that.
And so we had a little bit of education, but really a lot of it was more of like, just do it. Like, let's just take you. It's a little baptism by fire, but
Yeah.
like, we'll do that and try to help you understand it. And that program evolved really from just doing the fly-in where you came in, ran to the hill, and then left, to helping the members that we brought have a better understanding and context for what it was like to live and work in DC, who are the people that are trying to write the policy, who are the people that are up there every day advocating for different things, and they can help you better understand the issues in such better ways than you may even understand the issue, at least from the policy perspective. And so we started, instead of doing a quick fly-in with the national group, we added some time to it to help, again, the members be educated.
Yeah, so they can see behind the curtain.
And better understand the context. And if you can understand like why the people up there are doing what they do, you're going to be a better advocate because you can explain it to them better. You can understand the audience better when you're trying to tell the story that you're telling. And so that was how we changed it over a number of years, and ended up being a very people that go on it seem to enjoy it.
Well, and last year, 15 people, I think, went. I've been on ones where there's only been like 4 of us. And that was right after COVID, I think. It was slow to get back to that. And I agree. We would go into a senator's office, and yeah, it's great if it's Alex and I, but, of course, we like this topic. Now there's somebody from HCA. There's somebody from Tractor Supply. There's Alliance Burns, and so when you get that group, that makes a big difference. And they would listen a little bit closer. And then they would get them to go to their companies. I know we've had at least one of our senators that would then go to their facility. And so getting them to see things on the ground here. And the things that I learned early on, because I was almost like disappointed if we met with one of the staffers, right? But actually, they literally run DC. And you start, the Alexes of the world when he was 20 was running DC. You start to learn that. And so, there's a couple of staffers that, reached out to me after the last time we went, and we're working on stuff together. And it literally is turning into something.
Right.
And for good. And so those are the incredible conversations that we've had, and I always we have a good shtick when we go in, Alex and I, because we've been at these. We know you got to start quick, and you don't want the introduction to be 15 minutes of your life. It's like boom, boom, boom. Let's get to the issues, and then see where it goes from there. Make sure you hit something if they're from a certain area. All of that is fun. What is it that you like when you're talking to? Because I think people would like to know, like you're sitting in a senator or a U.S. representative's office. What is it that you feel is, first of all, worth the time to be there? And then why do you like doing things like that?
I think what I like doing most in those meetings is listening.
Yeah.
Helping people to tell their story. I think, the pre-work that goes into that to help people, if they've never done it before, to help them just look, just be you. Tell them where you're from, what you do on a daily basis, and what you care about. It's kind of it.
Is it be you, but be prepared?
Be you, be prepared. If you want to bring some giveaways or handouts afterwards to give them, that's great. But what you care about. Just tell them what you care about, and open up the conversation. They will hear you, and they will say, okay, well, let me know about this, or tell me more about that. But so much of those conversations, you get more out of them if you're actually sitting back and listening. Not just because you're trying to hear everybody's stories, which is super valuable, but number 2, you're hearing where the disconnects are, and you can help fill in. You're hearing where this person said something, but no one caught it.
Right.
And you can jump on it, or you can say, well, hey, Charlie, the senator just asked you about this. Do you want to bring that up again? Or I don't think they quite understood it. Can you explain it from this angle? And I think you have to have somebody in the room that's listening and paying attention to the dynamics of the room, and who's saying what, who isn't saying what, so that those gaps can be filled in, so you can really get something out of that meeting. And I do think a lot of those meetings, sometimes people come away from those meetings saying, well, we didn't pass a law or anything. It was like, well, that's not the point.
We're out here sowing seeds, right?
Correct. You're building relationships. You're building that bridge back to that person's local district, so that the next time they're in town, or the next time they touch on a certain policy that they know little about, they may hopefully met with the person in the room that does know about it, and that is their constituent, and they can reach out later. Or if it's something they want to know more about, they can reach out more and get more information from them and continue to build those relationships.
Yep.
And I think that's where we've had the most impact. Not on the federal level, we don't really advocate for anything specific.
Right.
It's mostly to help them understand who we are and vice versa, and that we're giant resources for them back in the district. And when they think about certain policies, they need to ask us. They need to talk to us.
There you go. Yep. And I think, that's the part that Alex has done a great job, not just for him, but for the entire Nashville Technology Council. And now is the model, I think, for other tech councils, is we went in initially just to say we're here. And then we are the resource for them. And then they started calling when there was a tech-related bill, and they got the advice. And if it wasn't Alex, he would get the right lawyer or the right technologist to answer those questions. Or we'd put together a focus group. And so now every time I feel there is a law, we don't have to go hunting for it. They're going to come to Alex, including, we know that there's certain people at the local level that are asking questions about AI, and they've reached out to you.
Yep.
And we've already gone and we have spoken to them to educate them. And they trust that if we're talking about it, because Alex brought them to us, that they should listen.
Yeah. So is it generally just don't write anything right now? Because we were talking about this on a different podcast.
Yeah.
It's like let's not make any rash decisions on like how we're gonna qualify AI legally. I don't know, whatever you call it, whatever policies we're gonna write. But it feels like now's not necessarily the time. Is that what message are you sending in that?
That's the message I would send. That's not what they're doing.
Like they want something.
They want to act. They want to jump on the hype train. Quite frankly, I would say.
Yeah.
A lot of it is they see that these are popular issues and they want to write legislation that has something to do with it. Or maybe they see some aspect of it that they're concerned about. Right. So we went and talked to a local legislator. Again, just being in the right place at the right time, having another conversation, they approached us, said, "Hey, we're writing AI legislation. We want to hear more about it." So having that, being able to be part of an organization that has hundreds of members, knowing a number of them specifically that care about them, being able to pull those people and say, "Hey, come and talk about this. Tell them your expertise. Tell them what you know about and why they should first do no harm."
Yeah. Do no harm. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I mean, that Hippocratic oath of policymaking.
I mean, right now, you just don't know. Like, we just don't know enough to know if something is going to do harm or not.
That's a very informed point of view.
Yep.
But
And
I
that's
would not say what that.
All right. Well, so when they come talking about stuff, just send them my way. I'll inform them to do nothing, and then we'll be good. Well, that's it. Like advocacy done.
You're on my list.
We've had those conversations, and I was able to say that to them in person because Alex brought us to them.
Why don't you brag about it?
Well, I want to take a step back for a second because I think this is a great opportunity to educate people out there. We have federal, we have state, and then we have local. Tell us a little bit of the differences between those and who would you approach in certain cases?
Sure. So let's do some examples. So right when I first started working at the NTC, a big, giant debate that was happening at the time locally at the city level was about broadband deployment and new entrants to provide more competition through fiber. Which
You mean
is
like
exciting?
Adding ISPs to the list of available ISPs.
Very rarely does that happen.
Yeah, Marsha Blackburn does not like that at all.
Well, very rarely does that happen because it's super capital intensive, right? It costs a lot to string a wire, whether it's made out of glass or copper, to hundreds of thousands of homes across the city. You have to either put them on poles, dig holes.
Google can tell us all about it now.
Right. And so that was the giant debate that was happening at the time at the local level. And so as an industry organization, right, you have to put a different hat on than my previous hats, which were more consumer focused.
Okay.
And so you're advocating for an industry or or your members. And so talking to policymakers about why competition is important, while at the same time having members that are the competition. So it's difficult coming from an association perspective where your actual members are the competitors and they want you to do different things. And so this actually...
That's true. Yeah.
Right? And so that was why at the foundation of setting up this advocacy committee, one of the first things that we did was come up with a policy statement about what happens when there's disagreement amongst members.
Yeah.
And so setting up from scratch, knowing that you're running an association, being part of an association that is going to have conflict. There's people that have different points of views, companies that have different interests, how you manage that. And so taking a local perspective, working with city council, right? We have a very interesting city council that actually looks a lot more like a legislature because it's got these at-large legislature folks that look more like a Senate.
Oh, yeah,
And
from a status perspective.
It is a large city council.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And there's good things and bad things about that.
Yeah.
But it was those folks that were deciding the policy. And so, how you talk to them, how you show up at local meetings as citizens to talk about that policy, you advocate on behalf of industry as well. And so that happens really at the local municipal building, and you go and talk to them over the months that it took. They only had meetings once every month. They were talking about open sessions where they were talking about these things. And you go and you say your piece, right? You say you advocate for what that is. We didn't do a lot of lobbying or anything at the local level for that, but just mostly to say competition's important. And even just the threat of competition had a giant impact on the cost of broadband locally, even before it had ever been deployed.
Oh, I experienced that. The second Comcast had to relent, all my prices went down. Like across the board. I didn't even have to call them. They just changed the stuff because they were like, well, now we got to compete with people, so
right.
Let's do right by them since we have to.
Right. And we were lucky enough yesterday to have the new mayor come to our board meeting and talk a lot about different issues. One of the first things he talked about was that digital divide.
Digital inclusion,
People
is a big deal here.
Right. And so people that still don't have access to basic broadband, let alone high-speed broadband.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead. No, you go for it.
No, I mean, I think that's, working at the city level, working with the city CIO and different task forces over the years on those committees that worked on studies for digital equity is super important because, again, it all feeds back to, as an association that deals with growing the tech community, if you don't have people that have access to the internet, they can't participate in commerce, they can't participate in education, they can't get a better job because so many of the jobs are posted online. They can't go to YouTube to learn new things or get online education.
If you don't have access to the internet, you're missing a basic right. But that's a point of contention right now as far as like internet is not a right legally. But we do have a city here in Tennessee, in Chattanooga, that has public broadband internet. And it is constantly being attacked. And this kind of ties into another question that I wanted to ask you earlier with regards to opposition. So you're putting yourself in a position to say, I want this. And well, what do you do when somebody else, like, a big figure in the state of Tennessee is just like, I don't want that very badly. And so now you're butting heads with them. So how do you deal with that? Do you have a strategy, or do you just do your thing?
Issue to issue, isn't it?
It depends on the issue. It depends on who those folks are. If those folks are, like I said, if those folks are your members, that's a whole other consideration. If those people are external to my organization, that doesn't mean I can't be an advocate.
Yeah.
But it does become a little more difficult when you've got competitors, and it's a different thing you can advocate for. And so, but what I've tried to do is try to find people who care about whatever that issue is and try to help them understand how to be a better advocate. And so try to expose people to the issues, try to help them understand them, and then try to find where their points of view are. So if we come to the table and say, okay, well, the industry is going to be generally harmed if this thing happens or if this thing doesn't happen. Who are the people that want to make it happen or don't want to make it happen? And if, as an organization we decide to advocate for it, then we can better identify who could be better advocates for that and how we can pull them together and go march up to the hill or whatever it is and advocate for that stuff.
So I want to spend some time with this one, with this particular example, just to like build out the full extent of what you're talking about. And so you've got a stated purpose to increase the tech awareness and jobs in Middle Tennessee, and the surrounding areas and stuff like that. And so as that being your stated goal, then it's in your best interest to increase the tech availability and like just the overall chances for everybody in town. And so you're looking at the issue of how do we get internet to everybody. Is that do we approach that in like the capitalist way? Do we approach that into like the city needs to build a safety net kind of way? Do we approach that in some other kind of creative way that we just don't really have right now? Or, a model that doesn't exist? And then, so once you've decided that, or like, is that something, actually, I guess the better way to ask it is like, is that the path that you take on making decisions of whether to or not to advocate for something? Like in this case, do you just see that as a potential solution and you just go for it? Or does some other like factor that I'm not maybe thinking about right now play into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the issue. I would say let's go for something that's a little less contentious and more
fair enough,
easy to everybody could understand, like tech education, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get very many people that are going to be competitive with tech education, meaning whether someone wants it or doesn't want it. Most people want more education.
Mm-hmm.
And so making sure that kind of education is available to more people. Who argues with that? Very few people, except for the people that own the purse strings that have to pay for things.
Yeah.
But those people can take convincing, right? That everything takes money.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't care just that it's about tech education. They care about just spending money in general.
Right.
And so things like tech education, like again, the mayor talked about a bit yesterday too. You have to just find and start locking arms with the people that are passionate about it. People have all the reasons to drive that. And we're a regional organization. And so being where the state capital is helps, but it can't just be the people in the state capital.
Yeah.
It has to be people across the state. And so not only do you have to find people that are advocates about it, but you have to find them all across the state, because it's really important for them to be talking to their policymakers that are in places that aren't where we are. They can be better advocates, like in the same way of like when you go to the Hill, the better advocate is the person that is represented by that legislator.
Yeah.
And so me talking as a Nashvilleian for people in Chattanooga ain't so useful.
Sure.
So finding those people across the state is, again, now a state issue, helping them be better advocates or locking arms with stuff that they're already doing in different ways. And then finding other national groups that care about that too, because there are a lot of national groups that care about education too. Code.org really cares about computer science education. They were amazing allies and helped tremendously to that effort of helping things like computer science education across the state.
Yeah, and let's talk about that one, because that was a huge win. All
absolutely.
three of us were involved in that. Charlie was on the education committee at that time, the other Charlie. And,
but barely though. This is your time to shine here.
But this is one where you can think of it locally, but it really is a state issue. And a lot of times, when you think about federal, you're going after big dollars to make things happen. Like broadband, you needed federal dollars. But this was a state issue, and you did get Memphis, Chattanooga, I'm assuming Knoxville people as well, and obviously everybody here, as well as even down to like Murfreesboro, which is south of Nashville. You brought everybody from the state together. We did, I know, some educational stuff. What was that process like, and then what was the result of it?
Well, yeah, what is it though that we're talking about first?
Yeah.
Sure. So, and let me step back just a second,
Go for it.
because I think this really ties back to data, and you were suggesting some ideas of, obvious topics tying a lot of what we're talking about to data. Data advocacy, right? So an organization like ours is a workforce development organization. We care most about helping to grow the local industry, helping grow but personally as people that work for this organization, why do we care? We want to make this place a better place, right? We want to live in the place. We want to live in the place that's growing and want to make sure that everybody has great opportunities. Well, workforce development is all about getting people into those jobs.
Yep.
And how do we know, like we talk a lot about the industry in Nashville is growing, and it is by leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
How do you quantify that? Right? Where are the opportunities? So we didn't used to have a jobs report that said what the market looked like, what jobs were available, what are the skills that are necessary for those jobs, where are the people looking, what's the supply look like, right? And I know talking with you, at least early on in those conversations, and this is always the topic when we go to Capitol Hill, is workforce development.
Yep.
As a region, are we developing enough talent to fill all those open jobs?
That's right.
And when you look at comparative data, that we work with MTSU and have worked with them for a number of years to generate a great report that helps break down all that data. They look at national data so we can compare ourselves to other regions. And comparatively, no, we're not doing enough. We're not doing, there's not enough happening to get more graduates to be able to fill those eventual entry-level jobs.
Yeah.
And then, especially expert jobs. No, there's not enough talent yet. And so
we can't rely on solely transplants.
it doesn't come
Exactly.
out right. You have to build your own, right? And it's been said so many times, but like the places that will continue to succeed are the places that planted the seeds.
Yeah.
Right? They did their own work. And so from a data-driven policy, being able to figure out, okay, well, how many graduates do we have out of these programs? Okay, well, then how many butts in the seats of those classes do you have? You can't have graduates without having people attending the class. And if you don't have enough students attending IT classes, then you're never going to have enough graduates. What does it take to get more students into those seats early on?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that kids are scared of tech in
Absolutely.
elementary school and high school. They don't know. They see it as a scary thing. If they see computer science, that looks scary. They don't want to take another science class, I guess.
It's skewed by gender too, right?
And it's very skewed by gender and race. You don't. It's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because you see a lot of white dudes in tech. It's a giant problem. But once you start working at the local level and talking to students and working with administrators and teachers and helping them to understand that a lot of this is problem-solving skills. A lot of this is trying to just generally expose students to more tech, and it's obviously become a lot easier every day as more students have devices in their own pockets. So they're not as scared as they maybe were previously, but they don't program for those devices.
Right.
Well, getting kids to understand that is not such a scary thing. It can be a little. I think the barrier to learning tech can be steep, but it's not long.
Yeah, I think a lot's put on teachers though in that case, but I think that ties into the work you were doing as well.
But that's the other side. So on the other side of that is not just that students don't get it so they can pursue a track like that, but you don't have enough teachers to be able to teach the students,
Yeah.
where they don't have the qualifications, or the state law is written in a certain way that there would never be enough teachers because they can't do enough professional development to be able to be able to teach those things.
Yeah.
And so that coming from all those angles, that really was what not just me and you give me a lot of credit, and I don't deserve, but I think a lot of people across the state were very concerned about that. Folks like Mega Igwekwe runs Code Crew in Memphis, John Wark locally. There's a lot of folks that, and this, the TSIN, the STEM organization locally, all coming at it from different directions, wanting students to have more access, wanting teachers to have more professional development. National groups like code.org knowing the impact that code can have for a student learning to build a tech career down the line.
Yeah.
And then just our local tech industry. I just remember one of the times when we were talking about these jobs reports, and you were just looking as we don't produce enough students. Look at these other students. It's not even close. And you could never get there, even if you were at capacity to do that. We could never get there until you had enough students learning at a younger age to be able to get into those classes down the line, or just even spark an interest.
There you
Just
go.
build a vocabulary.
And we used to always talk about it where, there's nothing worse than teaching bad computer science in 8th grade. And if you don't put the resources behind it, it's not the teacher's fault.
No.
They're throwing sometimes the track coach at it, and they're learning. And I would go into these classes with them, and they're like, please just take over a couple of my classes. I'm buried in them.
Yeah.
They're trying to learn it at the same time as the kids and doing the best that they could. But what if there was resources behind it? And I know that our approach was just have a computer science class in the system. So if there's, we're not even talking about every school. We were just talking about having it within a district kind of thing. And because it was considered a vocation, it still is in Tennessee. And most schools did not have something tech at all. No. And in Nashville, I don't know if there was any at the time. Rutherford County had a few, Williamson County,
that's why
outskirts.
That's why Williamson County has its own building for their entrepreneur stuff, is because it's considered vocation.
It is a vocation.
Yeah.
That's
weird.
Yep.
Well, that's how, the academy model here in Nashville that we have, there are schools that do focus more on that, and that's how the model is built. So two things. I think there's a few things to unpack there. I think the opportunities there are giant, right? But setting the policy aside for just a second, so much more about advocacy is about not passing laws, right? It's very little, actually. That's the last step. And getting people to care about the issue, educating them, understanding why all this stuff is important is tremendous. But like all the other stuff you have to do to get kids to care about tech, it's not just teaching it in schools. When they're not in school, a lot of the stuff that we do at the organization is trying to get at kids when they're not in school, right? To helping them get opportunities to
like camps in the summer,
traveling days.
You guys have had traveling days,
right? And that helps build connections in different ways, right? So you could be in a classroom trying to learn a computer science skill or some problem solving skill, but helping a student to see what it's like eventually to do that thing in life as a career is super important. And helping them see many views of that and helping them to see many people doing that hopefully some of which look like them is super important.
I'm with you 100% on that.
Right. And so getting them out of the classroom and into the business or into the environment is a giant piece of advocacy too, because they have to understand what they could be down the line. And if they don't understand that, there's no way that they will ever be passionate just for computer science unto itself. Maybe I'm a geek. I like coding in some things, but most people aren't. And if we need,
and we need a lot of people in tech that are not coders.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I say code is the easy thing to go for, but there's so many different things, so many different aspects of having a tech job. And that's what's so important about taking kids to go see a company that isn't a tech company, but employs so many tech people.
Well, that's what, when the kids would come by our office, back when we actually still had an office, it was the same. That was what it was. Like, we don't do development, we do customer support, but they can see how we work with technology from top to bottom to get it done. And I 100% agree with the position of, like, you're showing those kids a new way to be. Like a new possibility. Right. And as somebody who had that happen for me, I very much appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. And then, and so there's also this dichotomy of like, yes, the overall reason why I, as an employed person at an organization that's like a chamber, do this is because there's more tech jobs to fill. And so you want to get people into those jobs. Yeah. But then if you look at the data, tech jobs pay almost twice what the average job pays in Middle Tennessee. Yep. That's a life changer. That's a family changer, right? If you can get someone into a career that pays twice of what an average job pays, and it doesn't take that much more education to get into that job for many entry-level jobs, that's huge. You're automatically, you're very quickly, if you can get people to make that shift, you're very quickly getting people into better paying jobs. All of a sudden, housing becomes more affordable. All of a sudden, education becomes more affordable. There's so many more opportunities when people have more resources. And to the extent that we can help students know from an earlier age that that's an avenue that they could take and they could see, oh, that person looks like me. They have a job that makes a lot more than maybe my parents make or maybe that my family makes or what have you. they all of a sudden have a goal. They have an inspiration. They have, or even like whether they're seeing something, a person that looks like them doing something that they could do, or whether they go to an office and for whatever they're doing at that office, they get inspired by it. Right? That's what I think. That's why innovation is should be so enticing to more people, is because there's so much excitement about seeing something cool and new that can really get kids especially interested in doing it and can inspire them to pursue a career. And so that's why I think innovation writ large, I think, is super important to expose more people to, because I think it's inspirational too. But
yeah, change is definitely scary, but think about it for these kids. Like you're setting them up to break cycles. And so that's definitely change on their part.
Yeah.
And so you're creating change via innovation and proactive networking and advocacy and all this other type of stuff. But that's what it all boils down to, is you're changing the prospective future of individuals in your community to increase their well-being overall.
Yeah, and is an example like you, Charlie, who hasn't been to the Hill, hasn't gone and done that other stuff. Yeah, well, I'm trying to say, go do it. I'm not saying that, because you're still doing advocacy.
Yes.
You still do advocacy even though you're not passing bills. I think that's very important to say, even to the point where when you saw a gap in Nashville for training, you all here at the Nashville Technology Council, by the way, we haven't even mentioned, we're actually at the Nashville Technology Council, Tech Hill Commons. We're in one of their conference rooms right now. We're right next to their big room and their nice kitchen. But you guys are gracious enough to have us here.
we're excited to have you.
But you chose to actually create those courses, and you changed people's lives. So advocacy is more than just going out and saying somebody do it. You actually, here at the Tech Council, and I know there's a lot of other tech councils that do this, create those programs themselves. That's advocacy on its own.
It's leading by example too.
And doing the work, right? It's so much of the work that organizations like ours do are the hard work that a lot of people don't want to do or focus on. And it's tough. It's tough stuff, but it's more, we're not in the classroom teaching. That's what you do. Like, or the apprenticeship program that we work with Nashville State and Vol State and Nashville Software School to put programs together to get people not only education, but credit, and help them down the line of trying to help them find possible jobs. I'm not an educator. I don't know how to do that, but you see the demand, and you have to go for what the opportunity is to help those people. And the other side of the equation is there's open jobs, right?
Yeah.
We're also helping the industry that needs to have those jobs filled.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of work to do all around to help, what we call the workforce pipeline, to get more people into that pipe. There's many different ways to go about it. Traditional ways, non-traditional ways.
Absolutely.
Learning off of YouTube. I don't know, whatever it takes to help people get into those opportunities, and helping businesses understand all the different new ways that people can come at those.
That's a big deal these days too.
Is a big education piece too that we've worked on for years to help companies and their HR departments change the way that they have applications written, and don't rely so heavily on the 3 to 5 years of experience. Especially in the latest technologies, can you imagine if someone said 3 to 5 years experience in AI?
There's a running joke on the internet for like programming languages that like you need 5 years of experience for the language that's been out for 24 months. And stuff.
There you go. By the way, what was the result of the computer science in education? Is there a result at this point?
It hasn't been fully
being
implemented yet.
right?
It's being implemented right now. But the over 4 years, there were four different years that we advocated for this, and various different ways. And in the last run, it's always great to have, the king rooting for you. And so the governor decided to introduce his own legislation about it, which was a great leap forward. And dedicate and do it the right way, right?
Yeah.
The first legislation that Make helped to introduce was a computer science requirement, because he went right for it.
Yeah.
Knowing that wasn't possible and folks didn't care for that, we compromised over a few years to say, oh, no, what if we just make it available and not a requirement? What if every school had the opportunity to make it available so a student could have access but not a requirement? And what would that take, and how much money would that take to educate teachers and all the rest. And then finally, the last year, the governor, after talking with the staff so many times, turned around and said, no, we're going to make it a requirement. And not only are we going to make it a requirement, we're going to make it a funded mandate where they put dedicated dollars, recurring dollars towards educating teachers and coming up with a plan to change how curricula was developed in that area so that teachers could get new qualifications very easily to do that. And then, after a few years, there would be a high school graduation requirement as well as some middle school requirements too.
In 2028, right?
No, it's at the beginning of next year.
I thought that by the graduating class of 2028.
Graduating class of, yes.
Yeah, sorry. The graduating class of 2028 is going to be the first fully guaranteed to have computer science as a part of their education.
I actually don't think there's a delayed impact of it. So I think I think starting the piece that everybody was waiting on was kind of the ratification of the new education rules. And so I'm pretty sure that kicks in at the end of next year. So starting then is when students will start to have more requirements to be able to do that.
So they got to take extra classes, but that's not where it stops, though.
It won't necessarily be extra. It'll be kind of a substitution of some other class or a new option. But yes.
So they'll have options for the comp sci class, but also it's about changing the way that teachers are teaching, the analogies teachers are using. It's like instead of Tommy's got 2 apples, it's like Tommy's got 2 iPhones, or whatever. It's simple stuff, but it's introducing a more tech-based vocabulary to the youngins from was it 3rd grade was when it started? Yeah. So then that's a good age from a technology perspective for kids to start picking up on it and whatnot, because their brains are getting there.
And that was the other thing about all the policy was that we finally helped to get it passed. Then we get to do the other hard work of bringing industry together to say, okay, well, are the specifications that the education folks are writing relevant to the industry?
Yeah, that's what we helped with some, right?
Which is exactly what I was going to say. That was the part. Yep. No, I mean that you're already bringing it up. So I mean that was the part that was wonderful because we were able to bring industry, that our members, together and say, okay, let's review what's being proposed and give input because they're asking, and we have a great opportunity to make an impact now. It rarely happens that industry has such a great opportunity to actually impact the K through 12 education piece of it. So
I felt good about that.
Yeah,
you should, because it was a great ability to have that kind of impact, and it rarely happens. So thank you for participating.
And it was it's a long play. If you're doing advocacy, it takes time, it takes trust, it takes all of those important things. And I noticed early on, because people were in such need of help, people weren't interested in talking about high school and middle school. They just wanted people. And then over time it was like, well, wait a minute, now we live here, and so once you saw the roots of companies really here in Nashville, and I think it took time, then people got on board, and then it just became a snowball effect. And it was great to see. I was shocked that it became a requirement in every high school.
Well, that was a change there at the very end.
Yeah.
That was.
Or at least I didn't know about that.
That's what the governor introduced.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Because you were asking for way less, and then he was just like, well, let's do this. And you're like, oh, heck yeah.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a great example of what advocacy can be, because it's so much more than just passing the bill, which was important, but you even did education well before any of that, and advocated, help, introduce higher ed to companies. I mean, the fact that I'm here, this is my gateway to companies, has been the Nashville Technology Council. So I've, and that's been great for companies to see. Nashville Software School has absolutely benefited in the right ways, helping you and also helping companies get the talent that they need. And that has been a huge thing. Alex, let's talk about the future a little bit. What do you think is?
One last thing about the comp sci thing is you're shirking responsibility, for, the positive type of responsibility. It feels like to me. So I'm just gonna I appreciate you moving the ball and keeping it moving on that.
Thank you.
That was very. it was very needed, but that is exactly the part that you've overemphasized today. And so for those of you who haven't been paying attention, he said multiple times it's about meeting people. It's about going to where they are. It's about getting to know what they think about things, so you can better tell them what they should think about things.
Absolutely. I just feel like I want to hit him right now.
Why is that?
Because it's good. It's good stuff. I feel like,
Okay.
because
Becoming
you're
a
always
real good
across
advocate.
there.
He's like, damn it, he said a good thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think that's been an easy one, right? Like we've gone into offices and it's always been easy conversations because it's labor workforce, it's education. Is that do you feel like some of our future topics for advocacy are easy ones, or are we starting to get into things that are a little bit on the harder side?
Yeah, I don't know where the next easy issue is.
Yeah.
We're starting to deal with some very contentious stuff, right? So, like last year's data privacy legislation passed. We had a couple years dealing with working on that kind of legislation for a while. From an industry perspective, to try to make it as least onerous as possible, right? A lot of this is around compliance costs. A lot of it is around how much it takes for a company to have to deal with it.
They're always going to say that, though. Every single data privacy conversation from a company perspective is like, well, it's going to cost me, so the prices are going to go up, so it's going to cost the customer.
For sure. But at the same time, a lot of those costs are legitimate. But not only that, you have one of the arguments that I spoke about that ended up being kind of the champion for the little guy when we talked about it was, think of during COVID how your habits changed, not just online and all the rest of the changes, but like
You're about to trigger me.
think of that you take advantage of today now that we're out of COVID, all the delivery services, right? Think of the mom and pop restaurants, the tiny pizza shop you were able to order from during COVID because of those new technologies, right?
Yeah.
Think of all the data that pizza shop now has to deal with just because they now use an online ordering system where they didn't ever do that before. People phoned in, they took an order, the pizza showed up, like the person showed up to get the pizza and then left.
Yeah.
They have, if they're successful, hundreds of thousands of people's information now that they didn't have before, they didn't have to deal with before. And they're used to focusing on their dough and their ingredients and getting the pizzas delivered. They're not an IT shop.
They're not focused on PII.
They're not focused on PII.
Yep.
Did the people that that provided them the service set them up right? Did they have a third-party service? Are they using something of Squarespace or something they built themselves? I don't know. But like there's a lot of people out there that will be caught unawares of laws like that.
Yeah.
And that's a giant barrier to doing business in a state. And for an organization that I have to put the hat on now of a chamber-like organization, that again, for all the same reasons we want to pass computer science because we want to make this area a greater place, we also want to make a place where people can build their own business. And there's not giant barriers to entry for that.
Yeah.
And do we have to be one of the first states that adopts that policy when we've already got such a badge of honor of doing business very openly and freely in this state? So those are things that have to be considered, and that's the kind of legislation that we have to be more and more worried about because these issues are attractive to policymakers because I think they're interested in them for various different reasons, but they don't necessarily understand the impact of passing legislation like that on big business. They're super savvy. They're doing business in multiple states, let alone international.
Yeah.
They know how to deal with this stuff. They've already built their systems in ways that they don't have to worry about complying with local laws. Local business or mid-sized business doesn't necessarily think about those things. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm not saying that they shouldn't figure out how to protect consumers' rights. At all times, they need to be doing that, and they are. But when they have new things foisted upon them, when they're not thinking along those lines, having laws that have teeth to them, like penalties and dollar penalties and criminal penalties and things like that, that really has to have a lot more education to it before you pass that.
I don't disagree with that.
And so that's the kind of stuff that we're going to see more and more of when we talk about AI. shortly after, when we were in DC, when we were in Las Vegas for CES, new legislation was introduced by press release talking about
That's right.
how to protect.
Music.
We're in
wasn't it?
Nashville. We
Yep.
want to be super protective of music rights and people's artists' rights, and the governor worked to sponsor legislation around helping to protect artists' voices, especially with respect to generative AI.
Yep.
And so, like, what are the ramifications of that? Like, are we talking about creating a new kind of right in local law that deals with that? How does that even work?
I do feel like as far as legal stuff goes, like that's where government should focus right now is on intellectual property and copyright infringement and stuff like that. Because ethically, there is a line with AI that we have to figure out.
Well, and those laws probably already exist in a lot of cases, and now you just have a new technology that's part of it. And I think what you're hinting at is a lot of your success has been in making sure they don't pass something that could hurt a lot of companies, a lot of individuals. And I know there have been many bills in the data policy world too, like 4 years ago or whatever, where it was up and you're like, if that passes, that's going to hurt a lot of people. And they would get killed at the last minute, or they turn into a study or something else. I know that those successes are out there. And so you almost become a watchdog to make sure things don't get passed then.
Yeah. I've worked in an industry that's like not the most wealthy industry, but we did have to deal with GDPR when it was enacted. And I can say from our perspective, like it's not that big of a burden on tech companies, at least. But I do think that something has to happen, because the opposite is like you've got a company that does business across North America and they've got 50 different data privacy policies that they've got to adhere to. So like should the focus be on some federal rules and then the states don't have to worry as much?
Yeah, we've had those conversations in DC, and
So
I can
made a
say
face,
they're frustrating. Yes.
That frustrating from, well, we don't have to get into it from
No,
this
I think you
perspective.
should.
So frustrating from what perspective?
I don't know if you want to say, or I think
Just say at the same time. 1, 2, 3, go.
No, I mean, I think the issue ends up being for some of those types of visits is that right now the current temperature in Congress is very gridlocked. Right, you can't get people to agree
On the data privacy stuff?
on things like data privacy.
Yeah.
You may actually be able to get them to agree, but it ends up being politics about why they can't pass or why they can't move forward. And so that's the difficult stuff. That when we go to DC, we say, okay, we don't want a state by state patchwork of laws. We don't want 20 different, 50 different.
So you're already saying
privacy
that
laws.
type of stuff.
We do. But then when we say that needs to be done at the federal level, they say, yeah, but we can get no one to agree on that. Or like people are moving stuff, but it doesn't go anywhere because of politics or what have you. And so that makes it really difficult. That makes it open season for legislators at the local level to just start running with it, because there's no one at the federal level that's actually going to solve the problem.
I was actually surprised. Like Tennessee's not normally a get ahead of the federal government on policy state, but with the data privacy they did. I was surprised when they did something. I'll say that.
Because at that time we were one of the first in the top. Not if it wasn't the top 10, it was pretty close to that.
There's still only seven states that have something passed.
Enacted, maybe.
Enacted,
Passed
that's what I
is-
mean.
We're up to
Passed
like
is-
13 or so.
You're right. Enacted is what I mean.
Yeah. So that will kick in July of 2025. So we've got a little time to help educate people and help them understand.
I don't from the state, like I read through it and it just didn't. It doesn't have teeth. Like everybody's exempt from doing anything, and the AG has to decide whether they're going to take something to court anyways. Like I can't sue a company here, and that's a big miss on my part, because like what's the point in having data privacy if the consumer am not protected?
Yeah.
What I would say is that it gives you a lot more breathing room to figure out your policies to do it yourself.
That's fair. That is fair.
And it gives Congress a lot more time to take national action.
And we've got something on the books.
And there's something on the books that's not bad.
That's a good
Right?
perspective.
And so to the extent, again, going back to do no harm,
Mm-hmm.
it was a lot of what the conversation was about, was to try to, and ours looks a little different than some of the other states, because we tried to say, okay, what are some of the barriers we can, quite frankly, we can put into the law that make it easier for more companies
Yeah.
to still exist without having to worry about implementing this until they get their act figured out.
Yeah.
Until they get figured out, I was like, okay, this might be something, like if the legislature comes back next year and changes a digit, well, that's going to screw them, right? They could,
Yeah.
or if they come back in 26 after a year of impact, they're able to say, okay, we know fewer businesses are worried about this because they took the time to implement it.
Yeah.
And so that's better for most people. But at the same time, you still have a lot of companies that are big companies that are implementing the technologies and are focusing on that from the app level, from all the different service levels. And so they'll lead by example. And you might get companies that come in as service providers, say, look, we will solve, small company, we'll come and solve your problem by use this system and we're all compliant, regardless of where you are in the world, this policy, right? And so that will help, should lower the cost for those small businesses to end up having to comply with those regs.
Yeah.
And the market worked, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an argument of like why we don't jump into drastic changes.
Yeah.
Because if you get the opportunity for people to come to the table and find ways to make things work, and then you end up having better policy written in it. And in the end, business can still do businessy things.
Yeah.
And consumers end up getting protected. So I think that's the end goal. Whether we get there quicker is the harder thing.
Okay.
Right? Whether if you implemented a draconian thing really fast, do consumers benefit?
No. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. What you're saying.
Yeah.
I like that's a new perspective for me though. The do no harm on the beginning or in the beginning part. I mean, I 100% agree with it because they definitely could be messing stuff up. Especially on the AI side. Like I worry that they'll make some sort of like this is banned or this is not applicable in these situations, or they'll remove it from some situation that maybe it doesn't need to be removed from.
Well, I will say, so the language of that voice legislation finally came out yesterday or the day before, doesn't even mention AI.
Huh.
The closest thing it talks about is algorithm, but it's mentioned once. And it really has less to do about people transforming people's voices to use in other contexts that like the generative AI does, and more about creating new rights in people's in photos, in videos, and voice and audio.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
which
yeah.
has nothing to do with AI.
So then it doesn't matter what the tool is.
It doesn't matter what the tool is. It's
Gotcha.
more about
So are they
creating a
attacking
new right.
So are they attacking NFTs?
Right. So a lot of this looks like name, image, likeness.
Yeah.
A lot of it looks like, not defamation law, but potentially like defamation law.
Wow.
Defamation law without the defamation, right?
Yeah.
It's all about like creating new rights in people's personas.
Yeah, it's misuse of like personal identity or like a sovereign identity, maybe a better way to say it.
When was the last time you posted to Instagram or Facebook
Me?
or any social media?
I mean, every day.
And when was the last time you posted a photo of someone that wasn't you?
Like, wasn't me or my immediate family?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It included someone.
That
that wasn't
included,
you.
yeah, for
Oh, I
sure.
don't know.
I do ones where I'm including them because I'm
you do
at
Like
even in the
an
background?
event.
Even in the
Oh, we'll just say all of them.
All of them.
Like almost all
Right?
of them. Yeah.
So every one of those people in Tennessee would have a right to their image.
I
That's a
usually,
big deal.
I like where you're going with that because I think that is a conversation that we need to have. But I personally like to ask for permission before I take pictures.
You're at Disney World and you're going to ask every person in the background for their permission.
Well, see, here's the thing. I've got this thing called technology, and I touch the person in the background, and they disappear.
Oh, well, yeah, but I mean, I know what you mean. It's like when I'm at a meetup and I'm taking a picture and everybody's even waving in the background.
Yeah.
It's almost like they are giving me permission,
Right.
but I don't have a written permission
I think
for that.
I think that if you put an image up like that though, and then the person comes and says, "Please take that down," it's your responsibility to take it down.
I would too. Yeah, but that right now is just personal courtesy. That's not law.
Right.
Is
What if there's fines behind it and they don't have any process? There's no said process in
You're
the law.
not in
that
their
has to go
house.
through.
well,
Remember,
so
you're
just so
in a
everybody
public
knows, we're
place.
talking like a GDPR type thing for personal
Yeah.
personal use.
It's more like a state copyright in your persona.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which sounds like we have to bring Alex back.
Yeah,
And
like
AI, you're going to become like our referee commentator during football games. It's like, and let's go to Alex now for the new AI legislation, which that is not a joke.
Yeah, that's not a joke at all.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to have to bring you back for any of that. But since we're already at a good amount of time, so we didn't even talk about AI or anything like that. So obviously we have to have, when it becomes more mature, because I don't think we can talk about it yet and have everything that we say be negated next week.
Oh, we can talk about it though.
We could talk because we're good at saying things, and then the exact opposite happens the week after. That's how good we are. Is there anything in the next year, Alex, that you're excited about, or whether it's the NTC here or within anything that you'd like to talk about?
I think one of the big themes over this next year of programming is really to help to increase education for a lot of our members.
I like hearing that.
Right, helping them to level up their career, level up their understanding of so many of the things they work on.
Well, workforce reskilling is going to be something that people start talking about more and more as the years go by.
Yeah.
Right, and back to the innovation side of things, helping people to get excited, inspired by the innovation they see. It doesn't even have to be the stuff that they work with. I think we went to CES.
Yeah.
My hope for at least part of that was to help the people that attended that get a little inspired by the crazy, amazing stuff that they saw.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
Right. And my hope is to do more and more of that across the year, and increasingly to help people, get excited about different things, spark that enthusiasm for stuff. Maybe a lot of that's going to be AI and seeing crazy things that AI can do, but I think there's so much more, and there has to be more that we do in the state and the region to talk more about innovation, to get people more excited about just pure wonder and pure interesting.
I mean, that's where we're at. This is a point of wonder because nobody knows what we're going to look like in 10 years.
But getting people inspired as opposed to fearful, I think that is a great thing to aspire to do here, and I think you are doing that. You have a lot of course, good events that are more on the social side. You do good ways that bring people together. Obviously, advocacy is big, but you're right. The part that the education has got to become part of what we do here, because everybody is behind the scenes saying, okay, I'm a tech person. I should know everything about AI, but the truth is I don't know anything. And I get that over. And I mean, we've had closed door discussions with groups, and they just want the 101 on AI. And that to me is important. So the fact that you're creating that space for them has been really good. I mean, I know there's new peer groups that focus on like chief data officers, which we've had on. There's you have a CISO one as well, and you're continuing to do that as well as creating community, as well as now the education to go with that. So yeah, I'm excited about that because obviously I'm wanting to be part of that, and will continue. Yes. And I'm going to be part of that. So obviously, Charlie, you've been involved with the NTC for a while, and it's been a nice model here. I think other cities think of Nashville as the model. And there's a couple of mainstays. Sandy Hoff is one. She's been here for a long time. The other one that we can say is Alex has been here 8 years. And so the two of you have been the mainstays here at the NTC and have helped grow it. Of course, that doesn't mean other people haven't done amazing things, but you are the two that have been the glue for all of these years. And thank you for that. Charlie, anything else?
No, I also appreciate the effort you're putting into things, but more importantly, the example you're setting of do not stop, keep moving.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I'm going to wrap it up, Charlie. You good with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Alex, thanks again for joining us today. If you all liked what you heard today, please just go to our website, dataforall.io. That's data, the number 4, all.io. You can see all of our podcast episodes as well as our videos. Every video that we put up on YouTube is listed there as well. And of course, please subscribe on your favorite podcast player. And for that, Charlie. I'm Charlie Apigian.
And I'm Charlie Yielding.
And until next time.